Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be running you through all of the key updates in FPL to help you get set up ahead of the Game Week 11 deadline, including transfer tips and who is the best player to be putting the armband on ahead of Game Week 11. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. For now though, let's crack on with the show. So as always, let's get started by having a look at my team performance from Game Week 10. Now, obviously, it was a good week for me, 65 points and a huge green arrow, halving my rank and now around about 1.4 million. So plenty of ground still to be made up, but a good week finally, and I really needed one. Let me know in the comments how you got on in Game Week 10. And of course, let's take a quick look at how each player did individually. So I think there wasn't really too much to note on Saturday. I did bring in Salah ahead of Foden for one free transfer. It allowed me to also keep Erling Haaland because I had the money in the bank from a previous transfer I made last week, and that was Son to Johnson. And both of those moves kind of paid off in the long term. So Salah straight away has come in, got the goal, got the bonus points, and obviously outperformed the other significant captaincy choices. So that was very helpful. And also the fact that Johnson, Rodgers and Solanke all scored in the Sunday game between the two clubs was extremely good news for my team. Obviously, starting all three of them was relatively brave, and it was putting a lot on the fact that that fixture would be full of goals. Luckily, for once, it paid off, and I did, in fact, get the goals. Now, Solanke had been very frustrating for all of us, including myself, over the last few weeks. Finally came in good with good underlying data against Villa and got the returns as well. So definitely looking much better to have him ahead of Ipswich at home right now. Elsewhere, there wasn't too much to shout about. Obviously, Arsenal lost a clean sheet early. That's not great for my double defence. We'll come on to them later. Lewis got benched, so that's something that we need to monitor. And again, I'll be discussing that in this video. And elsewhere, there wasn't really a lot to shout about. Calvert-Lewin, yet again, getting taken off early. He's definitely a problem that I need to sort very soon, if not this game week. But overall, I can't really complain too much. 65 points is a strong performance in what was a low-scoring game week. And again, I'm back on track to try and break into the top million very soon. And hopefully just keep stringing the green arrows together for the next few game weeks. Okay, so let's start off today by looking at some of the key issues facing our sides ahead of Game Week 11. Number one, topping the bill, is Cole Palmer. Now, he played the whole match in Game Week 10, but got a really late tackle that probably left him a little bit worse for wear, although at the time, we didn't really think too much of it. It has come out since that he is a doubt ahead of Game Week 11 from Maresca himself. Now, it's fairly early. I'm recording this on Wednesday evening, and the quote itself came from a Wednesday press conference. So I wouldn't necessarily panic just that much yet, because Cole Palmer is so important to the way Chelsea play. With such a big game coming in Game Week 11, I would be very surprised if he didn't start, if he's anywhere near fit enough to. And given what we know so far, the fact that, okay, he hasn't trained so far this week, but they are going to try everything they can to make sure he is ready for Game Week 11. If I had him, there's no way I would be selling him. Even though it is Arsenal this week, they come into a great run of fixtures after that. So worst case scenario, he is a doubt for this game week. Maybe he even doesn't play, which again, I think is like a 5-10% chance. But if that is the case, as long as you've got anyone on the bench this week, I don't think it's worth selling him, because you're going to want to bring him back in after the international break ahead of Game Week 12 when they play Leicester anyway. So it's easy for me to say that as a non-owner. I certainly wouldn't be buying him this week given the news that we've got. But again, I would not be looking at selling him unless it was a very isolated scenario where you've only got a starting 11 and you really do think he's a doubt ahead of Game Week 11. But again, I probably wouldn't be selling him right now if I were you. Moving down, Erling Haaland isn't a fitness doubt, but he is a form doubt going into Game Week 11. I'll talk about him a bit more in the captaincy section and of course in the transfers looking ahead for my team too. But looking at it on balance, the XG is still there. The data is very much still there for Erling Haaland, and a lot of the criticism that's been levelled at him in the community has been more around the finishing ability in recent weeks rather than the fact that he's getting the chances. I think I would be more worried if he wasn't getting the chances And with Kevin De Bruyne getting minutes in midweek, with Phil Foden getting back to his best pretty or close to, I think it's only a matter of time before Haaland gets even more chances and starts burying the ones that he is already getting. Now, whether or not he's value for money is another question. And again, it's something that I'll be eyeing up as a potential transfer out in the coming weeks. But as an isolated pick, I still think he's a good option to have ahead of Brighton away and then Spurs in game week 12 as well. I think chances will flow his way. I think the XG number will be high, and it is a matter of time before Erling Haaland, a finisher of his class and his ability, starts putting it in the back of the net once again. Now, again, that's not to say you can't sell him this week. There are definitely combinations of moves that I would quite like, but with Cole Palmer being a risk to start and both Arsenal and Chelsea playing each other, unless you were doing a swap to get to Salah in the midfield, then I probably would just leave it this week. And even if you were looking at bringing in Salah for Haaland and you have the free transfers to do so, I'd still hesitate because I think Erling Haaland is very close to, if not as good, a captaincy option as Salah is this game week. So I think it's one that I'd probably revisit next week when the Chelsea and the Arsenal fixtures turn a little bit and there are other premium options that are ideal to be bringing in his place. But again, he is a lot of money. There are other things you can do with that money. So don't let me put you off selling him if you did want to hold on to him. Rico Lewis is a player that I'm worried about. I've got him in my 11. And now Kyle Walker is back, I would be concerned about his X-Mins over the next few game weeks. And I think as a long-term pick, he's looking pretty risky right now. All of that being said, he's still going to get minutes. He's still going to get starts. And the fact that Kyle Walker had a really poor performance against Bournemouth might mean that Lewis just comes straight back in game week 11. He did play 90 in midweek in the Champions League, though, in again what was a poor performance for Man City. So he's far from a guaranteed starter now. And I think if you've got loads of free transfers spare, then he is an option to be getting rid of, especially considering Man City's fixtures from a defensive standpoint aren't looking great, and they themselves are looking very easy to catch out on the break right now, especially without Rodri in the middle. So overall, I think there's no way on earth I'd be bringing him in. I'd in fact be looking to sell him in the next few weeks if possible, but I don't think he's a massive priority to get rid of this week if you've got issues elsewhere. Now, Eze and Van de Ven are similar issues. It looks like, based on the information we've got available, that they'll both be out this side of the international break, potentially coming back in game week 12 or beyond. But I think given the fact that they are definitely out of this week, I would probably, and I think in most cases, be looking to sell or bench either of them. I think with Van de Ven, because he's a 4.7 million defender, you could probably hide him on your bench. But with Man City in game week 12 anyway, you might be looking to get rid of him either way. With Eze, because he's a little bit more expensive, because there are so many good midfield options out there right now, I would say he is probably a sell right now. So let's talk about some of the key movers in that the FPL community is making ahead of game week 11. Number one is, of course, Mo Salah, who will be a captaincy option this game week. A lot of managers have gotten sick with Erling Haaland. They feel that they can get more value for money out of Salah, and so far so good. And of course, he's got two good games, Villa at home followed by Southampton away, both of which are definitely captainable fixtures. So it makes a lot of sense to be bringing him in. He's absolutely amazing on the bonus points, and the way that the bonus points are structured this year really favours goal-scoring midfielders who create a lot of chances. Salah ticks all of those boxes. So every goal, every assist he gets, it's quite likely that he gets extra points on top with the bonus. Even if he only gets one attacking return, he'll probably get bonus points with that. And so far, I think he's got 18 bonus points from just 10 game weeks. It took him 38 game weeks the whole season to get to 24 bonus points last season. So he's already absolutely smashing the record for bonus points so far. He's on track to get 60 odd. So I think he is a fantastic option, and I would be looking to bring him in as quickly as possible if you can. Now, Solanke is another player who will be top of the list for a lot of managers. Obviously, brilliant in game week 10 against Aston Villa, who are struggling a little bit right now. But Solanke is a very feast or famine kind of player. We've talked about it on this show quite a lot in recent weeks. We've seen a lot of famine. Now we've seen one feast against Villa, and I think the matchup really suited him in that game. I also think the Ipswich match in game week 11 really suits him. They'll pin Ipswich back. They'll get those cutbacks to Solanke kind of territory on the edge of the 6-yard box. And I do imagine he'll get at least a couple of big chances in this match as well. So really like him as a move in. If I was buying a striker this week, it would probably be him if I had the money for him. Moving beyond that, Bruno Fernandes and Semenyo are both players with great fixtures in the next few game weeks. I'd say Bruno's more of a short-term pick, but his fixtures are objectively better than Semenyo's. So if you've got spare transfers, you like the fact he's on penalties, you like the fact he's a 90-minute man with great data, and you want to take a short-term punt on him, given the new manager bounce as well, then I've got no hesitation in recommending him to you. He can be a very annoying pick to own at times, primarily because his teammates seem to waste a lot of the chances he creates for them. But again, he does get a lot of chances himself, and you'd imagine over a longer term, he will still return good FPL points. So I still think he's a good pick. A little bit more expensive than someone like a Semenyo, who I think right now is probably one of the best budget midfielders to have in the game. I picked him up on my Game Week 6 wildcard. I'm glad I held on to him because the fixtures from now on look really, really positive. His data is fantastic for someone as cheap as he is, just 5.6, 5.7 million, I believe. 0.5 XGI per 90 is incredibly good for someone at that price point. Good fixtures. Do not hesitate to recommend him to you either. The main defender that a lot of people are looking at this week is Ola Aina. Now that is of course because of the 15-point haul in game week 10. What I would say though is whilst he is probably one of the best cheaper defenders out there, the fixtures over quite a long period of time now are not looking quite so nice for Nottingham Forest. So what you'd be banking on is the fact that they have been a good defence, they are supplying us with good defensive data, and that continues despite the fixtures rather than the fixtures bringing form with it. So again, I don't think he's a bad buy, but I probably wouldn't be prioritising him as a must-own right now, considering the best fixtures are now in the rearview mirror and they've got some tricky ones, especially from an attacking point of view, to come. So, as always, we take a look now at the match projections ahead of Game Week 11, the projected bookies' chances of goals and clean sheets as provided by Rob T FPL. Do go and check him out on Twitter. As always, fantastic work from him. Now, the ones that I want to highlight this week are the 4 teams that are expected to score over 2 goals on average, those being Man City away at Brighton. So again, that might bode well for Erling Haaland holders. You've also got Man United at home to Leicester. I think that's more to do with the fact that Leicester are a promoted side playing away from home and have been shipping a lot of goals recently, more than the fact that Man United have been lethal. But again, if you are looking at a bit of a differential over the next few game weeks, Man United attackers might not be a bad way to play it, especially the likes of Bruno Fernandes. Now, Spurs and Liverpool are the other 2 options. Liverpool 2.35 at home to Aston Villa is very decent and again bodes well for those of us on Mohamed Salah. And then when we look at Spurs, by far the highest expected goals ahead of the weekend at 2.9. So if you're prioritising moves and you're looking at putting all of your eggs into Game Week 11, Spurs attackers are almost certainly the best way to go. Son is definitely an option. The X minutes might be a little bit lower for him, but still definitely a good option. The likes of Johnson and Solanke, both fantastic options ahead of this week, strong buys. But it is worth noting they've got Man City next week, so maybe a little bit of short-termism there. But undoubtedly, the opportunity is there for them. Now, the other thing I found really interesting from this spreadsheet is the fact that across all 10 games, all 20 teams, none of them are projected a clean sheet percentage of over 40%. So this could be a high scoring game week. It could be one where our defenders maybe aren't expected to get clean sheets usually. Obviously there can be exceptions there, but all of that goes to show that maybe the upside that we should be chasing this week is in our forward line, in our midfield where attacking returns can flow, or in aggressive attacking defenders, rather than trying to locate clean sheets and moving around transfers in our back line, knowing that maybe there's marginal or limited upside considering the clean sheet odds across the board are pretty low this game week. So on to captaincy this game week, and I think that this is the most difficult decision facing a lot of FPL managers ahead of the deadline. I've narrowed it down to 4 choices, but there are, of course, as always, plenty more that you could pick from. The top 4 in no particular order for me would be Haaland, Salah, Son and Solanke. Now, Son and Solanke, it's fairly clear. You don't need to be a genius to know that Ipswich at home is a good matchup for both of them. And considering what we just saw against Aston Villa and the fact that Spurs are topping all of the XG numbers out of all 20 sides so far this season, it is, of course, going to be really tempting to use your armband on a player playing against one of, if not the worst defence in the league at home. Chances will be created. Solanke and Son and Johnson as well will all be good options this game week to own and perhaps even to captain. I think out of Son or Solanke right now, if I had to pick from one of the two, I think Solanke just about takes it. He's more central. The chances created are mainly falling to him right now. Obviously, a lot of big chances against Villa and in a few other select weeks this year so far too. And although they've struggled to create him chances in a few games, I think that was primarily because he was dropping deep against another side that was willing to come at them and attack. Ipswich are probably going to get boxed in a little bit, get pinned back, and you'd imagine that creates a lot of space for Solanke on the cutback around about the 6-yard box where we saw him expertly finish I think it was a Richarlison cross in game week 10. So I really like him. The data's great, in fact almost as good as Salah, and I think the X-mins are very, very high considering Richarlison picked up that injury. And Son, again, whilst he's a good pick, and possibly, if not probably, on penalties, I think his expected minutes are maybe a little bit lower. So out of the two, I'd probably just about favour Solanke for the armband. However, I do also really like Haaland and Salah. Now, Salah is an obvious one. A lot of managers are buying him this week for the intended purpose of captaining him. And against Villa, who obviously just shipped 4 goals to Spurs and lost in the Champions League, they're starting to maybe look a little bit leggy. And Liverpool have an extra day of rest after the Champions League fixtures in midweek. So that does make a lot of sense. Of course, the home crowd will get behind Salah and Liverpool as well. So all of those factors probably favour Salah, and from an expected points point of view, he does come out top of this spreadsheet on Fantasy Football Hub. So again, it's not by a lot, but 0.5 points as a margin is reasonable when you look at the underlying data. Now, I think overall right now, Salah is possibly my favourite, and he's where my armband currently sits, but I'm definitely not ruling out putting it back on Erling Haaland. Now, again, he's been really unfortunate recently not to score more than he has. Possibly that's down to some poor finishing, and that is, of course, his fault. But 1 goal now in, I believe, 6 games in all competitions is pretty low. Certainly 1 in 5 in the Premier League. But the data, especially in the last couple of game weeks, has been very, very good. And if he'd even finished 1 more chance in the last 2 weeks, I don't think any of us would be panicking as much as we are about Erling Haaland. And I think if you can hold on to him alongside Salah and alongside one of the Spurs boys, I still think he is a good player to own against Brighton away from home, who will come out to play. They've got that infamously high line, and they've been caught on the break on the halfway line several times this season already against the likes of Chelsea, against the likes of Tottenham, I believe, as well. I do think that there is opportunity for Haaland to get at least 2 or 3 big chances from getting in behind the Brighton high line and having a good long run down at goal. And I think that Haaland, whilst a lot of managers are selling him, still represents a good captaincy alternative this game week. Perhaps an opportunity, while some are selling, to maybe go against the grain and put the armband on him anyway. Overall, I think I very, very narrowly prefer Salah, but I would possibly put Haaland in second, followed closely behind by Solanke, just merely because of the expected data and the fact that Haaland has the penalties as well. So on to my team selection ahead of Game Week 11, and I'll use this opportunity to also talk about my potential transfer plans as well. Now, as you can see, there are issues in my lineup, but overall, I'm pretty happy with some of the big hitters. So having triple Spurs, I think, is a massive positive. Having Salah and Haaland, I don't think too many teams have both of them. Again, really like that in combination with the triple Spurs. So happy with all of those players. Also really happy with Mbeumo and Semenyo in the midfield for the upcoming run of games. That is probably going to be a pretty high scoring game between Brentford and Bournemouth, so not fussed at all about starting both of them. I think the issues then start to arise elsewhere. So we're looking primarily at double Arsenal defence away at Chelsea. Not loving that whatsoever, but it is crucial to note that I've only got one free transfer and very limited money in the bank. And there are, I believe, bigger priorities elsewhere than getting rid of Arsenal defenders when they're about to run into a very good long-term run of fixtures where they've already gotten a lot of their toughest away games out of the way this season. And you can probably hold on to Raya, Gabriel, Saliba for a very long time, and I do still think that the clean sheets are going to return. Their defensive data hasn't dropped off enough that I believe them to be easy transfers out. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that there'll be a good differential to have as a double up once the fixtures turn from next week onwards. Rico Lewis is an issue, but again, I've got Mykolenko on the bench to come on ahead of West Ham away, and if Lewis, we do get any sort of word in the early leaks or anything, we've got a 3 p.m. start time for games this week. Man City kick off at 5:30, so who knows, at maybe 1 o'clock we might get a team leak on Man City. You never know. If we don't get that, I probably will start Lewis and bench Mykolenko, but happy to make the switch there. And then the other issue in my side, the very clear glaring issue, comes with my 7th striker, well, my 7th attacker, that being Calvert-Lewin, who has been horrific for me. Now, West Ham away is a good fixture, but considering how he's been playing recently, the fact that he's been getting taken off earlier and earlier, I think that there is a very reasonable chance that he gets benched against West Ham with Beto starting from the off. Again, considering how well Beto has been playing coming off the bench recently. So that is a serious risk. Now, if I don't think he starts, the obvious option is for me to sell him for someone 6 million or below because I've only got that 0.1 in the bank. But that gives me limited possibilities. I'm looking at Wissa, I'm looking at Raul Jimenez, Delap, Vardy, Strand Larsen, maybe even Welbeck. But I'm not going to lie, I don't really feel inspired by any of those moves right now. I think if I was forced into buying one of them, it would probably be Wissa, who does have good fixtures for the next few, but then having double Brentford attack ahead of a fixture swing and around game week 15 doesn't feel great. Wissa doesn't have penalties. He does get taken off early as well. So I'm not massively convinced by that. Same goes for Jimenez. I do think that whilst Fulham's fixtures are decent, Jimenez himself is only ever going to be 1 or 2 game weeks away from getting benched for Muniz if he has a poor performance or two. So again, I just feel like that's a problem waiting to happen for me. And players like Delap, Vardy, Strand Larsen, again, just aren't really inspiring that much confidence for me right now. The player I do want in that position is Matheus Cunha. Now, I can't get there with one free transfer. So what I'm thinking of doing this week is probably rolling the transfer against my better judgment. Obviously, very tempting to get rid of DCL now. But I could arguably just start Rodgers away at Liverpool if I did think that Calvert-Lewin was going to get benched, or I just take the risk. I go for Calvert-Lewin from the off, hope that he starts, and then also doubly hope that he does something against West Ham, who have been poor, although Calvert-Lewin himself has also been extremely poor. All of that enables me 2 free transfers next week. I will have a double switch in mind at the very least, where I'll be looking at selling Johnson against Man City and bringing in Cole Palmer against Leicester, all enabled by possibly getting rid of Erling Haaland and bringing in probably Alexander Isak ahead of West Ham at home. Now, making that double switch gives me a lot of money left over in the bank, and if I'm going to be moving on Calvert-Lewin in one of these next 2 weeks, either way, I'd have to take a hit next week. I'd have to take that -4 because using my 1 free transfer this week means I'd only have 1 left next week. So it'd still be a hit next week in game week 12, regardless of what I decide to do. But if that enables me, if I can wait 1 week to make the move and it enables me to get the player that I actually want in place for DCL, I think it's worth just rolling the transfer this week and taking the hit next week with 3 moves rather than compromising on the move I want to make this week, getting a player I don't really necessarily feel that enamored by, and then also having to take a hit next week anyway. So that is a very long-winded way of saying I'm probably going to roll my transfer this week now, despite the fact that I'm sick to death of Calvert-Lewin. I'm not that confident on Rodgers being a good 7th attacker for this week away at Liverpool either. I think for the sake of one player to have 1 poor game week, it's worth just rolling the transfer and getting the player I do want next week. Let me know, as always, what you think of the planned moves, how your team is set up ahead of game week 11, and of course, any dilemmas or questions that you've got, do let me know in the comments below and I'll try and get back to all of them before the game week 11 deadline. If you've got this far, I really would appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you next week as we start preparing for game week 12.